Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Arcade. My name is Brian, and I have a treat. I'm going to be speaking with the developers over at Iron Age Media. That is going to be Richard and Dean. They worked on the game Lower the Gates, which I did a video of earlier. It was for the conservative game jam or the It's-based game jam. And I'm trying to talk to all of the people that were involved in the game jam because I think that this is where we get we'll find the real talent, right? Like the hungriest people are creating this kind of content, and I'm very excited to speak to these gentlemen. So welcome, Dean and Richard. How you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Great, thanks.
All right. So first of all, I guess I want to ask, how'd you guys meet? Did you guys always know each other, or is it what's the backstory between you two? And who else is on your team? How big is your team?
Well, okay, so our backstory is very short because we basically met just for this jam, and before then, Dean, I don't know if we've had really interacted before then, but I mean, we've been on the Discord, chatted a bit, but I did not really have a clear plan for the jam based on the theme, which was SP. What is SQPR? SPQR. Yeah, there you go. And I always forget if the P or the Q is first. But yeah, so I talked to somebody and they said that Dean had a idea but was looking for a programmer. So that's how we got started there. Just as a side note, Iron Age Media is kind of like, it's a thing that I've been doing. Dean is doing his own thing, and we just kind of hooked up for this, and it's on the Iron Age Media itch page just because that was the more convenient place to put it. And since I was the one pushing most of the programming updates, it's the where a lot of the bug fixes and whatnot would have to come from.
Yeah, because the game jam is like a short little thing. You had 2 weeks?
Yeah, it got extended slightly.
Yeah, but by almost another week. And the idea was to make a game based on a theme, and there'd be a little contest. So have you guys ever done anything like that before?
I've not participated in any sort of game jam before this one, nor do I really have any experience in indie. It's all mostly AA in industry work.
Oh, wow. So you've worked in the AA is coming up. It's a serious, a lot of people are enjoying the AA space, and the especially these days with everything that's going on with AAA and quadruple A. I don't know if you guys heard about quadruple A, but that's a big thing now.
I think that's just what they call projects that take more than 4 or 5 years. They have to add an A to justify it to the stockholders.
Yes, exactly.
Project with grossly overinflated budgets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Richard? Have you ever done anything like this? Even it doesn't have to be about games. It could be, there's zines and other sort of projects like that.
So I've done quite a bit in the indie space over the past 2 years. A little bit longer than that. But I, as far as game jams are concerned, I participated in the previous conservative game jam or based game jam. And then before that, I had done a few with the team where it was kind of a stop and start. We ended up not submitting anything. And then with ironage.media, the purpose of that website is to highlight indies. So I've interviewed a number of indies as well as promoted a lot of stuff. And I eventually started up my own magazine of genre short fiction and comics called ANVIL. And if anybody likes to read short fiction, especially, you can check it out. But you can find links to it at ironage.media.
Yeah, so you're kind of covering the gamut, hence the name Iron Age Media.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your so what is a conservative game jam, in case people are... We know what a game jam is, but why conservative game jam?
Well, some of that question would probably be best addressed to Duke, the guy who started the game jam and has kind of guided it and really been the person who's been behind everything. But based on my talk with him, his goal is not so much, oh, we're going to have like explicitly right-wing politics or anything like that. He just wanted to make something that wasn't, that's outside what I refer to as like the mainstream left, and also not part of the ideologically driven far left, and wanted to make a space for it. And he felt like just the word conservative in it is enough of a filter to kind of, deter some of the people who would be reluctant to be there, and whatnot. So it's
Yeah.
Conservative in this case is certainly more of like a blanket term.
Yeah.
So everyone in there ranges from people who are apolitical, centrists, right wingers, libertarians, all that kind of stuff. It's really just people who are kind of sick of games being infested with woke nonsense. Me included.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, because I completely see that, and I've always said this. I've been talking about these things for over 10 years now, and I'm not at all bothered by the fact that it's called the conservative game jam or the base game jam. I understand why, but essentially you're just not like crazy woke leftist. You're just normal. so like that means that you're based or conservative. Like, this is why I think that to dip my toe in politics a little bit, because I don't really want that to be the main focus of this, but I think that we have the lines as people see them, like a lot of people that talk about this stuff, I think that most of them get it wrong. And it's basically just like a small group of people that are in a cult. And then there's everybody else. And everybody else is like all over the place. And that's why they often, they may not agree with each other on certain things. Some of them are religious, some of them are not, etc. But they generally like all understand that this small group of, or maybe like small group of powerful people that are ideologically, let's say, cultish, that they oppose them. So it's sort of like the normal against the abnormal in a way. But anyway, I'm being really, really simple with my language, but that's kind of how I would.
Well, I think it's very fair to say that the right or the non-left has a huge branding problem, right? Like, how do you even define it? You don't want to define things as anti or non. And this is part of I guess, shill my own brand slightly. The whole Iron Age moniker was brought up as the idea that independent media that is refocused on, producing quality and things that people actually want in their comic books or novels and things like that, initially is where the term kind of started. There is a need to be pro something, not just anti something else,
for sure,
because that leads to all sorts of, down the line problems, I would say,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's well, when you said the non-left, that's generally how I frame it. It's not that that remainder is necessarily like standing against something as its identity, but what they're for is so varied that you can't really brand it. Because ultimately, though, what I like about what you guys did with this game, Lower the Gates, is that it because the theme is Rome. It looks like you guys just made a game that was like, okay, what was that like? Let's do a Colosseum thing. And other people had, and so it was basically, what I'm getting at is that it seems like what the focus tends to be on is what is like a good representation of reality, even if you're going into the sort of mythological or the supernatural or the science fiction, but it's based in something like universally held as true. I don't know if you understand. You got to understand what I mean by that, right? That that something that is true doesn't need to be real. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think it might have been C.S. Lewis who was talking about the idea of sort of like hyper reality or something to that effect, of the sense that there are stories and parables and things like that are specifically false, but they are actually more true than perhaps a true story. in some regards, because they are more universally applicable and they're true across time rather than just one specific instance. So yeah, I know that there's a term for that. Somebody smarter than us clearly came up with it, but
Yeah.
and put it better. But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think, Dean, about that? Do you have anything to add?
I certainly couldn't quote any C.S. Lewis. I'm not as well read as Iron Age, but I generally agree.
Okay, so okay, quickly about the process of this game. So what you only had about 3 weeks, but 2 weeks was what you were working under, like the impression, right? How quickly did you guys come up with this idea? Like, did you guys say, okay?
Instantly. I came up with it the second that they mentioned Rome. One of my favorite games of all time is the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. And in that game, like the Imperials are very like Romanesque. So I immediately thought of like the arena quest line in Oblivion, which is really what the gameplay is based off of. And also one of the judges was Ian Crosland from Timcast. And I'm a regular viewer of the show, and I know that he loves the Elder Scrolls series, and so I was like, oh, perfect. Like, I know just how to make this game. I got all the theming. Like, here we go. Like, he's going to love it. And ironically, the other judge, Andy Pants, ended up liking it more than Ian did.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But
yeah, you know what I thought of, and you know what, I did think of Oblivion when I played this, and I sucked at it, but it's okay. I did try it again afterwards, did a little bit better once I understood I can press the E button to switch weapons and trying to scroll like a madman to get to the spear. But it's okay, no big deal. But the other game I thought of when I played this was this game called Hexen, which I only played once back in the 90s. You guys, are you familiar with Hexen? It was like Doom, but it was medieval, and you could like you had like these I think there were classes in it or something. I didn't, so I was very young. I was like in my 20s. I didn't own a computer, but I had a friend. He was like that friend that got everything because he made a lot of money, or he had like really generous parents, and so I got to experience Doom at his place the first time I ever played it. And there was this other game called Hexen, which was like it was like melee Doom, and that's what I thought of. But I also thought of Oblivion or Elder Scrolls games, even though I never played them. It did have that feel, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be, something special." So, I mean, granted, especially considering you only had 2 weeks to work on it. You had blood, you had combat, you had stages, you already had like RPG elements, So it's super impressive. Like, who did the art direction for this? Like because it has a comic booky look to it.
Well, Dino, there was a discussion early on and about what kind of style we wanted to have with this in terms of top down or first person and everything else. And Dino, who's not here, or Dino Storm, you can see his link there, has done he's working on some other games and everything else, but it's not a same perspective as this. So he wanted to do this, and he has obviously has a really fun style to his animations and illustrations and whatnot. So it worked out really well. It was definitely a bit of a challenge getting everything done in time, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
You said that you worked with comic books. You have some books and some comic book stuff. Did any of that have an influence on this at all? Or
no, I said, like my attitude is, I could pretty well on a short project like this, I can figure something out with the programming side of things, and I figure Dean can figure something out on the game design side of things, but the artist needs to be engaged and excited about what they're doing, and preferably in doing something that they're already good at and enjoying. You know what I mean? At least, going back to actually like Anvil and whatnot, in my experience, artists work best and fastest whenever they're enthused about a project. So I always try to give artists as much leeway as possible whenever they're illustrating things to get not only get the best work out of them, but also just let them show off what they can do and really invest in the pieces. So I guess hypothetically that could be part of it, but that's probably giving me way too much credit.
No, that I think that's really good. That to give, because I also make illustrations, and I know sometimes I work with people and they micromanage, they hang over your shoulder, they don't really make you feel like the ability to sort of try to read the room and create something that satisfies them and you. And yeah, I completely understand that. Do you think that leeway that you were talking about, that freedom for the artist to sort of like realize their vision, especially because you've chosen them for the way that they draw, do you think that is something that is lacking in like the sort of mainstream space, like that creativity?
I probably have a slightly controversial take here, which is that most artists, if you go look at their Instagram feed, most artists aren't drawing their own work. Like they're imitating the style of somebody else. They're drawing Spider-Man in a particular style. They're drawing, and I understand why. It gets clicks, it gets them follows, it gets them basically money at the end of the day. I understand that's how it works. But in the Iron Age, there's a number of crud. I actually gave that book away to a friend of mine, but there are certain guys out there who are very dedicated to drawing their own OC, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Some people say don't do that because you won't get as much attention, and they are technically correct. But I also think that if you build up an audience doing something other than what you want to do, it's not a good recipe for long-term success in a creative space if you don't want to burn yourself out.
Yeah, it's like not good. It's not good for your soul, because you're either you're restricting yourself to what people expect as opposed to what you can produce. Besides, once upon a time, you mentioned Spider-Man. Once upon a time, there was no Spider-Man, and then someone made Spider-Man. So there had to be like, when Steve Ditko put that down, there was nothing, and then there was something. And I think that a lot of, like you say, I think a lot of things are derivative. And it's, without getting into, again, another big tangent, but that's sort of like a part of what I'm starting to see with AI art a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Is that it's all looking like it's starting to reference itself, because it's seeing what people keep asking for, and it's producing more of the same of that. So, how do you feel about how you did in the GameJam?
I was just stunned and happy that we tied for first place. I think that was great. I wasn't sure what I really expected. I didn't have, I guess, any real expectations as far as where we would place. But I could just say I'm super happy with the result and very happy with my team. Everyone did a great job.
Yeah. And what games like that exist? What franchises that already exist that are out there? What are their primary for you guys? What are your which ones are the biggest inspiration for you?
Like
broadly
for
speaking, or for this?
Like if it's a certain genre, but also maybe a specific like game series that you enjoyed, like maybe you mentioned the Elder Scrolls, for example.
Dean, I'll let you go first on this one.
So if you're just talking about for this game, like I said earlier, Oblivion is 100% the biggest inspiration for this. It's a game that I know frontwards, backwards, and sideways. So it was really easy to come up with this concept. But that's also like one of my favorite games of all time. It's one that I could spend endless hours in, no matter how well I know it. If they made that game in VR, I probably wouldn't see you guys ever again or anyone else. I'd probably never leave my computer. But yeah,
is that something that you would like? Because we had this one little game. It took you like 2 weeks to make it, but and I know you've worked in the AA space before, so I imagine that you'd like to make your own, be your own, have your own little team, make your own little game. What would be like where you would draw from? Like, what is the inspiration for that? Would it also be Elder Scrolls, Morrowind, whatever, or is there something else like?
Do you mean like when developing like professionally?
Yeah, like when you, yeah, like for making your own projects. Like I guess because I know that you have a lot of experience in the space already.
Right.
So I guess I should back up a little bit first and ask if you are still working professionally in the field, or if you are maybe you have your own studio, or you're hoping to build one, or whatever.
Well, I was as of last Friday, and then I became one of the many devs unfortunately experienced in layoffs. Um,
Oh,
which it's okay, like no big deal, like it happens. There's certainly other people affected as well. So like that being said, like I'd love to do more indie stuff. With that being the case, and the unfortunate reality too is when you're developing in like a bigger studio, even like a mid-sized studio, you don't really have as much creative control or direction. Even if you're project lead or which is usually the case for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we kind of talked about like creativity and art and such. And I would say that there's a massive creativity collapse right now, and I think that the main reason for that is, at least in my experience, the games and the directions are decided by like board members of people like boomers and such who don't play video games, who don't understand video games, and who just see it as a financial risk, and they don't want to take a financial risk by putting out something cool, unique, or interesting because it's really just investments to them and nothing more. So I would love to go indie to have more control and make games that I actually love and enjoy, and hopefully to inspire others with my games the way that other games inspired me to become a designer in the first place.
Yeah. Was you being laid off? Was that just like because they had to let people go because of financial reasons, or
Yeah,
economic reasons?
yeah.
Okay.
They a lot of us at this last place were just on contract, and a whole ton of us they just didn't renew.
Yeah, okay. All right. I was wondering because, like, again, as an aside, like, I noticed that I've done some interviews with people in the past who lost their jobs, even though they were very good at what they did in the sort of animation industry. So I knew this guy who worked in animation. He worked on, well, I'm still friends with him, but I haven't talked to him in a little while. And he worked on like very, very popular shows like the Ninja Turtles and Steven Universe and, some other cartoons. He was very good. Some Australian stuff as well. And he got let go because there were unions that were trying to put certain people in place, and they had to get rid of the old guard, and they essentially put out an open letter, made a bunch of allegations, and a bunch of male staff members got fired. It was a Me Too thing. This is also what happened
hmm.
in, I think, what happened with Blizzard around. I don't know if you remember, but there was like a big controversy that the
Oh,
sort of offices
yeah.
at Blizzard were like this, frat house environment, and a bunch of guys got let go, just on the basis of that, and then they replaced them with different employees. And I think this is a thing that I've heard, like Ubisoft. I think you mentioned Andy Pants Gaming, and he got an interview. He put a video up of like a conversation he had with a guy who used to work at Ubisoft that found that there was this big changing of the guard. So I was thinking that, I don't know if that's why I asked you, because I wasn't sure if it was part of this broader pattern that I'm starting to see, where all these different areas where there'd be like a creative business that used to be like on, Blizzard used to be like one of these devs that like they never missed, right? Everything was good and it came out whenever it came out, and it's certainly fallen a lot. And I don't know that it's entirely because of Activision's purchase of them, because I think that the culture there was changed fundamentally. So that's
Right.
why I was bringing it up.
Right. Yeah, and I think in my case here, there were whispers about it for a while, but they didn't really tell
Oh,
the contractors much.
yeah, of
Um,
course not.
that being said, though, there were some board members that switched around, and they were. I think there were whispers about like layoffs and cutbacks and direction changes, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems purely financial. The
Yeah,
economy's not
okay.
doing too good, as we all know.
Yeah, that's true. We do know that. As an aside, too, I wanted to mention that some other indie devs, like there's this one, I'm gonna be doing a little bit of a spotlight on this on my channel later. There's this game coming out called Axis Unseen. It's
Hmm.
actually out now. You know about it, and some of the developers of Skyrim and Fallout worked on it. So it seems
Yeah.
like some of these guys are, they're doing their own thing. And I think even though the AAA space appears to be on the decline, there's still a lot of good stuff coming out of because like the developers, the people with the actual talent, they don't disappear, right? So they go to work somewhere else. So yeah, just something to put out there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And something amazing about this community, which I found thanks to a Twitter post from Andy Pants, is there's actually quite a bit of anonymous professional developers in here, which is including myself, which is really great because you get to link up with these guys, kind of talk shop, and maybe we get to reorganize and make something great.
Yeah, awesome, man. That sounds great. I spoke to Cult Games. You know who those guys are? They made the Great Rebellion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I did a show with them, and I think that there's a lot of this kind of happening behind the scenes, which I find very exciting because I just want to see the best art. That's what I care about, and I think that it starts with the beautiful, the true, and the and the good. So
Couldn't agree more.
yeah. Oh, awesome. That's great. I'm glad. So let me ask. So you did really well on that. I like the game. I want to ask you something about one of the mechanics that I observed. And is it that there's a meter at the top, and it's like a thumbs up, and it starts to slowly move. How does that work? I didn't. I assume this is the Emperor, and he's like getting bored.
It's essentially a magnate of some kind. I can't remember. It was Jimus, I believe we were going to name him, but probably could have stood to have a pop up on that one explaining what was going on. But essentially, if your favor falls too low, you get executed, and you have an initial starting favor or approval of the crowd, and then that will decrease with time. So you can't just run enemies around. You see the spikes, for example, in those screenshots. You can actually kill the enemies if you just sort of juke around and run them over the spikes over and over again. And so that's not very exciting. I wanted this to be a very quick, punchy game and really force you into action. And so you can essentially just replenish your approval with kills. You also get a little bit more time. It's basically a timer, but you can modify it slightly as you're playing. I was going to have some power ups and other things, but hey, we had like 24 or 48 hours to polish the game, and quite a bit changed in that 48 hours.
Yeah, they Richard here and our artist Dinostorm in those 2 polishing days between the preliminaries and the finals really breathed life into this game. The 1.0 version is completely dead compared to this one. This one adds like the crowd and the Emperor and that cool like overhang. It adds like more cartoon shaders. Like they really knocked it out of the park in those 2 days.
Yeah, I like the confetti too. It was a nice touch. Yeah, I love the confetti.
Dino has a knack for the particle effects. So he did the particle effects of the exploding enemies and then also the confetti. And so
I love that the enemies explode in like a pool of blood. For some reason it reminds me of Ray Harryhausen. I don't know if you know Ray Harryhausen, the stop motion animation like of the Clash of the Titans and all these old Sinbad and these old movies with stop motion monsters. I love that stuff. He was big on Greek mythology too. So yeah, and I like. So I didn't know what the mechanic was, but I had a feeling it was a timer because, and the interesting thing is the psychological effect it has because if you're just kiting guys like just because you need to like regroup and figure out what weapons to use, and you're worried about your shield breaking and all that. Meanwhile, this bar is going down. It like really raises the heart rate, So I like that it's essentially, there were other games that used to be, from back in the day where you had a kind of timer where, if you didn't like, maybe you were in a constant state of losing health if you didn't like keep killing enemies, for example. So yeah, it was, I like that. That's pretty neat. What kind of other stuff do you guys want to do? Like, do you have any other, like, have you guys talked to, and I know that you've linked up with some other devs, even people that used to work in the space professionally. Have you guys talked about like ideas? You have any other ideas for things you want to do?
Richard and I haven't. We talked about continuing Lower the Gates and like making like a full-fledged Steam game, but for certain like budgetary reasons, it didn't work out, so we decided not to continue it. But as far as like the rest of the like Discord server and like its base community, like we're talking about continuing other games. One of them may be the other finalist that I may help them flesh out.
The biggest dickest one.
Architectus, yeah. So we may go that route, but there's some other things that we may have cooking. So yeah, looks like we got some stuff coming.
How did you guys talk to the judges at all? Like Andy Pants and Andy Crossland, is that his name?
Or Ian Crossland.
Ian. No, I know him because I know Tim Pool a little bit. Like I've talked to him a couple of times at various like events. But yeah, Ian Crossland and Andy. Do you guys talk to them at all?
We didn't talk to them much. At least I haven't. I don't know if Richard has, and I'm just not aware. But
no, I was going to say Andy was interested in seeing the Lower the Gates specifically continue. Which, yeah, like I said, I was thinking about it, but I was, it was going to be something that I would be funding at that point, and it was like, I've got a couple of things I need to take care of first, and I also feel like one of the problems that we had, at least I had with this game, is that like there's really no good comparable games like this out there right now. There are some, obviously direct comparisons can be drawn to something like Daggerfall or Hexen, apparently, in terms of that style. But there's a number of issues with this format of the 2.5D first person view. It's very strong stylistically, but it is very resource intensive in terms of it requires a lot of animations, and it's kind of hard to let the player know what their range is, and when you're in range, we would have to rework some things. So and even if you did that, it's hard to know for sure that the player would feel good playing it, so it's a little tricky, but yeah. And not to mention, I think, Dean has some ideas that he wants to pursue. I know the It's Based guys have ideas they want to pursue. I have ideas I want to pursue. So, it's kind of one of those things where everybody's got things cooking in the back of their minds.
Yeah. Are you guys all? I know that. I know Richard. I know that you're doing all. You got your fingers in all kinds of different little pots. But what kind of stuff do you think that we should see more of in any medium, like a gaming primarily? But if you like you said, you also do books and comics. But what kind of stuff do you think we need that you'd like to see more of, and maybe you could even like bring to the table?
So I have not. Although I publish Anvil, I have never like put forth anything. My wife is an author. She's put forth some of her, she's finished one book and is about to come up with another one. But my idea for like an IP that I want to generate, and probably I'm going to do so through video games primarily, and then with like short fiction anthologies maybe, and something else, just depending on what I think I have an audience for, is like positive sci-fi. Everything is so dystopian these days. I think that even if you look at the more successful, so let's look at the old sci-fi franchises. Star Trek and Star Wars dominated, and before that it was Buck Rogers and
Flash Gordon.
Yeah, exactly. And so you go back and you go back and you go back, and it was positive sci-fi, even if it was grim. You have things like Starship Troopers. You have the dystopias of like 1984 and Brave New World, but those were more seen as like cautionary tales. They weren't necessarily seen as the same thing as a lot of their other science fiction contributions. And speaking of sci-fi, and having said C.S. Lewis, I'll recommend the Space Trilogy to everyone. His first book actually is Out of the Silent Planet. I highly recommend it. But in the 90s, you started getting all of the dystopian novels, the various Neuromancer that turned into the Matrix craze,
the cyberpunk kind of,
And so everybody has just been doom and gloom, and even the indies. Like I love many of the people who are putting these out. I read even a very particularly good one called Theft of Fire by Devin Erickson. It's quite good. It's hard sci-fi. It's near future and whatnot, but it's ultimately fairly dystopian. You look at the what is it? The Expanse dystopia. Ultimately, you know, and I think that at least the vision I'm going to be putting forward sooner or later, once I get my opportunity to do so, is a very not only does humanity figure some things out, it doesn't mean that there's no challenges. It's not that it's
not utopian.
We haven't conquered the Wild West. We're still out in the new frontier. There's still challenges, but ultimately humanity didn't descend into madness and everybody killed each other and it's all so doom and gloom and we're just barely scraping by, because that story's fun, but I think it's just been done to death at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's true. I think that I was just I have another friend who wrote a book called Boobs of Steel, but it's about
him.
Jay Ishiro and Kat Rocha. So and we talked about this before and talked about how actually in I think it was the 70s there was this kind of elitist group of gatekeepers that were essentially saying all science fiction has to be this way. And it was like Isaac Asimov and a couple of others, and there was this dystopian thing that just had to be what the future was. And I wondered, I don't wonder now, but I did at the time, if this was an intentional subversion, because when I was being educated in art as a visual artist, painting, drafting, etc. I was learning about all the various periods in art history. And I noticed that everything ever since the French Revolution, art has become more and more subversive and degenerate and anti-beauty over time. I mean, by the standards of today, things like the Impressionist movement and the Expressionist movements were probably, they're still beautiful, but you could see how it over time changed. And then, you get around World War I, around the time of the Bolshevik Revolution and the Dadaists and the existentialists, and it was all just nihilism and the visual arts. And I can only really speak for that because it's what I studied, but visual arts paintings and drawings and such, they couldn't be beautiful. They had to be political. And I think that even back then, there was this gatekeeping going on where you had museum curators, art critics, gallery owners. These kinds of people were deciding what was good and what was bad based on their own sort of personal postmodern preferences. And at one point, I don't know if you guys know who Marcel Duchamp is, but Marcel Duchamp, he's famous for taking a urinal and putting it in a gallery and calling it art. And then it worked. He was doing it to make fun of the idea, but it turned out to be a huge piece. And ever since then, it was just downhill. And that even became true of art that is now called illustration, like the work of what's his name? I'm sorry, he did the Conan art, Frank Frazetta, and these other beautiful dark fantasy artists. And so it was getting away from the true and the beautiful and moving towards this kind of postmodern, twisted, subversive element. And I think that was also happening in science fiction. So when you say, I want to make, I want to do fiction that's not, I guess, positive, but it's more about it's good for the spirit, this kind of these tales of
you
heroism.
You can have dark stories.
Sure.
You can have heroism in dark universes and things like that.
Right, Solomon Kane.
Exactly. I think the need to Solomon Kane is actually an interesting example, because I'll push back and say that although Solomon Kane goes through various to very dark places and things like that, it's still rooted in the idea of his faith.
Yes.
anchoring him and driving him forward into these dark places. So I think that's like that's to me is not no problem at all. I wouldn't classify that in the same way. My sentiment is more that particularly with sci-fi always seems to be set in, a corporate oligarchy, or the overarching narrative is that bad things have happened. Bad things are in the future, and not just like one or two bad things, not challenges to be overcome, but like ultimately bad guys win, and we're living in the bad guys world, and either struggling against it or just trying to scrape by inside of it. So
like the Hunger Games.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just name it. It's widely popular. I think with the visual arts, I think I'm far less educated on that, but I would say, in my opinion, I think broadly speaking, as the arts moved into the university structure and whatnot, whereas you had philosophy has always been kind of in that space, or philosophy and the natural sciences and things like that have been there. I think as art moved into that space, I think that there has been there's always been an elitist cant to anything in those systems, whatever they are, whether they be universities or sort of nobility, like a closed noble society, or whatever it was at the time, even monasteries to a certain degree and things. But there's always previously been status conferred on those individuals. The problem with the university is that the status wasn't as apparent, and it wasn't as easily granted and distributed, right? It wasn't as automatic. And so I think the need to signal status outside of the strict university space, I think is one of the root problems with all of the arts and whatnot, because it's not enough to simply say, yes, that's good, when some peasant could tell you, yeah, that's pretty, that's a pretty painting, you know what I mean? You need to say, no, actually that peasant who thinks that painting is pretty is an idiot, and here's why. I'm so much smarter, I know, I have real taste. And I think that sort of pretension is at the root of a lot of things that have happened over the past 150 years. That
there's a group of people who were like, well, we know better than the rabble, and we're going to and I think that everything you're saying about the dystopian writings and this ugly art, I think it's demoralizing, and I think it's intentionally demoralizing. I think it's meant to demoralize people and to celebrate the ugly. But what do you think about what we've been saying, Dean? You've been quiet, so I want to put you on the spot.
Well, I think I agree with your take, everything you're saying about beauty and objective truth. That's music to my ears. I agree with all that wholeheartedly. I am very sick of seeing all this subversion, and I think the subversion's been around for quite a long time. It's just ramped up to 11 recently, and so everyone has been forced to take notice, where not everyone did before. And I desperately want to get away with that, or get away from that. I'm not a movie guy. I'm not a comic guy. I'm not a TV show guy or a movie guy. Like, I live, breathe, eat, drink, and sleep video games. So in this space, like, all I want to do is not only not do that, but to do the opposite of that.
Sounds awesome. And also, video games are, I mean, this is happening in video games now because people are realizing that it's the largest, most profitable entertainment medium ever, right? Like it's bigger than movies, music, and television put together. And so that means it has to be changed, right? So I like that you pointed out that it's been, both of you guys basically said that this has been going on for a long time. What is something that people don't realize that's very popular, that people don't realize is actually subversive, or kind of I don't know, like basically rubs you the wrong way, even though it's not overt. You know, like some people will say, for example, I'll give my answer as an example. People right now are freaking out about, you know, how awful Dragon Age the Veilguard is. You guys, I assume you know about how bad that turned out to be. See, that didn't surprise me at all, because I didn't really care for the first one. And I know some people, like, I think Fextra Life did a whole thing where they were like, this is the greatest game ever. And I was like, yeah, I played it. I didn't go in with any kind of, you know, presuppositions. I just wanted to see what the big deal was, and I just didn't really enjoy it. And I thought it was okay, and you know, and it also had, like I said, it had a lot of, you know, stuff in it that I was like, I don't think this would fly in a medieval setting. So you don't buy it as real. So, you know, when they do it now, where it's like, I'm non-binary and here are my surgical scars, and you're like, this is a fantasy setting, like, you know, like that. But I mean, I kind of saw it back then. Like, I would say the same for Baldur's Gate 3. It also has things in it that I'm like, the way that people speak to each other, just the way that it is. It's like Joss Whedon wrote the script. I'm not really sold on it. I mean, the game's fun, but you know, people are not going to convince me that this, you know, that these changes are recent. So, what is there an example of something like, it could be anything, it could be a book, whatever. Can you guys come up with anything? Or am I phrasing the question poorly?
I got it.
Hard to find.
There's a lot of examples. Yeah, right.
I have a comment that might derail the answer.
Okay.
So why don't you go first, Dean?
It's like, for me, it's like I got a whole bucket of sand in front of me, and I got to pick out like each individual grain of sand. It's like there's so many examples that come to mind.
What's what's like a sacred cow that you're like ready to just cut down?
Call of Duty.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one.
Pretty woke for a while. I think it
it's not like, I think they just revealed that there's like a non-binary character, and I haven't played Call of Duty since like the second one. So
the newest one that just launched is Black Ops 6. I'm a big first-person shooter guy. First-person shooters, RPGs, and retro games of all types. Like, those are kind of my genres. But yeah, they have a new non-binary character that you can play as in multiplayer, and they use the they thems and all that stuff for them.
But that's kind of on the nose, right? Yeah, that's super on the nose. Like, anyone who doesn't see it now. But go ahead with what you're going to say about how it's always been this way, or at least for a long time.
It's been this way since Call of Duty and Modern Warfare 2019, because that game was from October of 2019 and then all the way until October 2020. So this was during like COVID, the George Floyd BLM stuff. I think they shut the servers down for a few days. People to protest BLM. They took out they had like gestures in the game that you could do, and one of them was the OK hand sign, and they took that out because they fell for the stupid 4chan thing. And for months, they replaced all the loading screens with just a black screen that said Black Lives Matter.
Oh my god!
But it's been that way for a while, and I'm just like, can you guys just like stay out? But also, like, even the campaign was pretty subversive.
Okay, tell me about it, because I never played it.
Sure. I mean, it just doesn't reflect real life. Like, they have certain portions where there's characters like women characters like talking down to the male characters and emasculating them. They have like the leader of like the Islamic like rebellious faction is a lady, and I'm just like,
oh really?
Yeah, girl. And I'm like, there's no chance.
It just pulls you right out, right? Like the immersion is just gone. It's like gone. That. Yeah, it's completely gone. Like I played. Well, actually, here's another sacred cow I'll bring up too. Is BioShock. And like a lot of people love BioShock, and I'm like, no, they're totally like taking a giant dump on, like Ayn Rand and stuff, and they're doing this. Like I think BioShock is pretty subversive. And BioShock Infinite, that's a lot worse. Oh my god, yeah. So anyway, what about you, Richard?
So I think the biggest sacred cow that I would say, just as a single like IP that is inherently subversive, is Game of Thrones. And that's not the TV show that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the very first book. From the beginning, George R. R. Martin wrote that as a rebuke to what he saw as Tolkien's sort of like good and beautiful style.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. I'm sorry to cut you off briefly, but I think this is a really good and important point to make, because I had a feeling about George R. R. Martin's books, but I didn't read them. I just knew that, when I heard what he was going for with the realism, because that's what they call it.
And almost everything by Stephen King that's not a short story is subversive in one way or another. He has very static. He's, I would say, very comparable in terms of his character writing style. He has certain characters that are complete caricatures of a particular thing that he's wanting to critique. The Stand is just a painful example of that. Ironically, both. And one of the things that I love about short fiction is that you can play these games, but you respect the reader's time. There's a that's why I like short fiction. And ironically, I actually really like Stephen King's short fiction, and what little of George R. R. Martin's short fiction I have read, I've enjoyed. But you can't make a novel out of some subversive ideas.
Right.
You can't drag people along for thousands of pages and then kill the protagonist for no reason, because that's how sometimes things are in real life. And that kind of goes back to that idea of the meta truth, or the hyper.
It's like what we kind of want.
Reality is that these books violate sort of principles, because in real life, maybe it is true that sometimes you just die for absolutely no reason. It's terrible and it's tragedy, but you don't elevate people like that and then just strike them down for no reason without it feeling wrong, because you're sort of violating what people sense as universal principles. Mm-hmm. But the more controversial idea I have as far as subversive is that people don't understand how subversive their content streams are. And I'm not just talking about like the YouTube algorithm or something like that, or Netflix originals. I'm saying Netflix itself, Amazon Prime itself, all of your cable providers and everything else. People think that they have preferences, that they have these thoughts about what they like and everything else. And the reality is that they say, "Oh, I like Westerns." Well, what are you being served up as your Westerns? None of the old Westerns. You know what I mean? Nothing that even really has a true Western spirit. You're getting Yellowstone. Yeah. And so you're like, I like cowboys. I'll click that. And so then you watch it. And that kind of subversion is actually the more dangerous. And this is what I think the indie world and the right wing has to figure out, because we can't just go, "Oh, do you like Donald Trump? Then buy my book." Because the truth is that you probably won't. Like, if you read unfiltered, genuine expression from somebody, you may or may not like it. You know what I mean? Like, there's at best a 50-50 chance that you're really going to like that author.
Yeah. It's like when
necessarily know what you like, because you haven't gone out and been searching for what it is that you want. What kind of TV do you really genuinely like? What is it that you actually like about Westerns? Is it the pursuit of freedom? Is it the man against nature narratives? Is that what you like? Do you just like cowboys and Indians? You know what I mean? All those answers are fine, but a lot of people have had their content piped into them, spoon-fed for so long, many of us for our whole lives, that we haven't developed that ability to identify what it is about specific things that we liked, and then to figure out what it is or how to isolate that and look for more things like it.
Yeah, it's like they become the streaming. I'm not on any streaming services, so I try to like look for things that I want to watch or whatever, especially because my wife, she didn't really get into a lot of films when she was younger, so I've been exposing her to lots of things, and Westerns are one of them. We watched but even like, even the old spaghetti Westerns were a sort of like counter or like to the old black and white sort of Roy Rogers, John Wayne ones, and I think it comes down to what you were saying is that people don't know what they want because they don't know what's available, like they don't know what's on the menu, and so they're just sort of like consuming whatever's being put in front of them, and they have to be active participants. And to your point about like one of the things that annoys me about the sort of like when the right tries to make culture is they end up operating within the leftist paradigm. So what I mean is, and so they're trying to like do a counter to it, but they're still giving ground to these ideas. For example, the Daily Wire put out that Terror on the Prairie, right? If you guys know, with Gina Carano, and it's a Western and sort of, right? And I watched it with my wife, and when it was over, we were like, this was kind of dumb. Like I don't dislike Gina Carano. She's fine. But all it is the Daily Wire saying, look, we can make women strong without making them annoying. And it's like, yeah, but this still doesn't really work. Like you're still playing the game of woman strong. You're just changing, like you're moving the dressing a little bit, right? So it's like you guys got to get out of the mindset of, is this really real? Like, and that's what it's okay that the man shows up and saves her. Like, it's okay that or whatever it is, like however you want to do it. And I think that, like a lot of people make that mistake because they've been living under this miasma, this culture, as it's been sort of like constructed for us since before we were even born, that even when we try to push back against it, you're just going back a few steps, but you're still under that same, you're still in that bubble.
Yeah. I think this is two issues that this plays into. One of them is conservatives seem to really want to be liked by left-wingers. So they're not willing to just be honest and upfront and be like, like actually we're going to do things this way because we think that your ideas are stupid or your culture is ridiculous and subversive, etc. And also like the Overton window has been pushed so far left that now everyone that's quote unquote right wing ranges like it's like
they're just they're just the leftists from the 90s.
That's normally yeah, absolutely. Like we have like 90s and like 2000s like Democrats like on like the quote unquote right wing now, right? Where
or the far right even.
Like so like normally like an actual conservative and like say like a libertarian would be really opposed normally, but now we have like this newfound like allyship because we have this new cultural enemy. So it's weird. There's no real direction one way or the other.
I'll say two things to kind of add on to that. One is that just because like knowing what you don't like, this is part of the whole Iron Age sense, is that knowing what you don't like is fine. I think it's a good entry point, but you still have to figure out what you do like. And a lot of conservatives have never figured out a positive vision for what they do like, and that is a problem that the right culturally is going to have to overcome. And then the other problem is one that I mentioned early on, is one of branding. How do you brand? How do you find these people? Oh, well, they're disaffected, politically active individuals. So we have to kind of, if you want to make a multi-million-dollar movie, which is not a tiny budget by any stretch of the imagination, but $5 million still is a small budget movie and whatnot, and you expect to make any return on that, well, you're going to have some investors, and they're going to have to put some money down, and you're going to have an explanation for how are you going to get that money back out and make some at the same time, hopefully. And I think that one of the problems that we have on the right is an unwillingness to just start putting shots on goal. All this political money that people spend putting, and mind you, right now I understand it's an election year and everything else, but you could put 1/10 of that into a non-election year, making various documentaries. The Amazon Prime is full of these crappy left-wing documentaries that aren't even accurate at all, because somebody's willing to throw $500,000 at somebody to crank this thing out, and then nobody watches it. It fails, but then it goes on to Amazon Prime or Netflix or Tubi TV or any of these other services and just sits there and gains views passively, you know, like we're going to have to fail a few times. Part of the whole Iron Age thing is that it's rough. It's not, you know, it's not polished as much as you might expect in the mainstream, but it has good bones. You know, the backbone is there, and the quality is what's going to keep it up, not in the polished sense, but in the fundamentals that we need to start rebuilding as creatives. Because I mean, Dean, I know that you have some pretty serious chops experience wise on a game, but I doubt that if I said, you know, hey, what's your budget? I'll give you, you know, half of that. Please make me a blockbuster game, that you'd be able to do it on your first try, guaranteed. You know, like maybe you could. I hope you can, but that's not necessarily a good bet, because even talented people with a known track record sometimes just have flops, you know, or sometimes have things that only land okay at best, and that's just how things are.
Yeah, I think that loops into what I was saying earlier about how, you know, the game industry is so corporatized now, and it's run by people who just want to make a buck at the top and don't really give a shit about the medium at all. They're not willing to take any risks. So
yeah, they're completely like divorced from like what's going on the ground, because they're just like counting the beans, you know, and they just want to make what are the kids like? You're like, that's kind of how a lot of this stuff went bad, because you had people at the top that were not paying attention, and people in middle management that were like, oh, I'm going to make this about me, which is where you get all this narcissistic self-insertion. But to you talked about how the right doesn't get it right, and I was talking about this too, and that there needs to be an investment in culture, and to find out what you do like, I think that there is something that a lot of people on the so-called right are missing too, because they tend to avoid popular culture because they are sort of disgusted by it, and I get that. But there is probably some that can be taken from that, like, and that used for something. Like, for example, you know, there's a show that I really like. It's called True Detective. I watched the first season, and I think that True Detective is actually, like, you know, it's dark for sure, and it's nihilistic at points. But when you see how it ends, there is like there is a very like promising thing there that I think people are really drawn to. Like, when something comes out that does well, it will often have a kind of like, let's say, hopeful or beautiful element to it that really sticks with people. And so I think that, like, for example, another film that's very similar to True Detective is the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Right? Did you guys like that movie, or you know what I'm talking about? You ever seen it? I think that was a book too, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was. I have not watched the movie in many years, so there's. I would say I haven't really been thinking hypercritically about culture until probably about, I don't know, maybe the last 8 to 10 years, and I think I haven't seen it since then. But
well, I'm using it as an example.
A lot of interesting. It's one of those movies where I think it has a lot of Christian messaging at the roots of it that it perhaps did not intend to, you know. And
exactly, yeah.
That's
what I was going to say, because what a lot of times what the people who make it's sort of like Paul Verhoeven, you know, made Starship Troopers thinking, oh, I'm going to really give it to them, and then like, you know, people are like, well, they're actually legitimately not a bad faction. I mean, they even have good fashion sense. And so, like, it's like when you are trying to do a good job, even if your intent is to say something else, but you do it well enough that the truth sort of comes out accidentally, at least you didn't intend for that to be. And that's what I mean when I talk about things like Seven. And I think that there is something that, you know, people who are making content that already know what's out there, they can see what it is about what they did like that works, that is true and beautiful, and, you know, and they can like bring that into their work. So you can, you know, because otherwise I think it can end up being, you know, just like a really ham-fisted, on the nose, sort of preachy, you know, counter narrative. You don't want that. Like, that's just cringe, and it's just not good art, right? It has to be I think it should be pulling from something that does work, because the best subversive works have a kernel of truth in them. So it's that kernel of truth that you want to use, and then you make it into like something really special.
Yeah, that kernel of truth lends it some credibility, and then you kind of take the steps after that.
So, okay, I don't want to keep you guys for too long because we're a little over the hour. So I wanted to ask, like, what's next? What do you guys do? What are you working on now?
You go ahead, Richard, if you want to go first.
Okay, well, geez, a couple of things. The magazine ANVIL. This is the.
Did people like get it online? Or
yeah, so if you go to anvilmagazine.com, you can grab any of the issues. They're high quality. I get them printed locally. I've had some trouble with this 4th issue printer, but excellent story from a great conservative author is the feature for the 4th issue. He used to write for the BattleTech franchise, but has his own mech series called Land and Sea that is fantastic. I think it's better than anything that's been in the BattleTech franchise for quite some time. And a number of other great stories there. I have a comic which you could see was inspired by the Iron Age Media logo. In this 4th issue, it'll be shipping soon. So if anybody is interested, there's digital and physical versions available. The 5th issue will be coming out hopefully early next year as well. I also am always updating ironage.media, the website, with various things. I've been a little bit slow in the fall, just trying to get caught up on things. And I'm going to be continuing my game development aspirations, trying to bring some of that positive sci-fi futurism into reality. Hopefully sometime early next year. So we'll have more about that. You can. Anybody who wants to check out what I'm doing, you can go over to ironage.media, and I have my socials linked up there.
And this book, ANVIL, it's sort of like short stories, like a
yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's a basically it's a fiction magazine, kind of what the old Weird Tales and whenever heavy metal very, very first came out was like, and then it's about 80% short stories, and there's about the first one. I think we have 7 short stories. The other ones have between 10 and 12. It's sci-fi, fantasy, some of it's urban fiction, but it's all sorts of different things. My goal here is to help readers and people who are interested in getting into the indie space have a wide sampling of authors and styles, so they can say, oh, wow, this person's great. And at the end of the story, there's a little blurb right there. You can go and check them out and find more of their work. Everybody is, again, it's not like everybody's rock-ribbed Republican or something like that, but it's just it's people who are not happy with the current state of media for a whole variety of reasons, and a lot of excellent stories in there.
Yeah, how well has it been doing? Have you been selling well? Is it more than you expected?
Yeah, the first issue went pretty crazy, in part because I had the preview of the Ghost of the Badlands, which was a comic.
Oh yeah, the Razor Fist book.
Yeah, from Razor Fist and George Alexopoulos in there, and so that one went very, very well. The second, third issues also did well. The 4th issue, I've had trouble with the printer here, so it's let me tell you what, physical media as an indie is always very difficult, and it has just been very challenging, but it's getting out there. It's moving forward. I've got some other literary projects going on, but nothing that's quite ready to kick out the door yet.
That all sounds really, really exciting. I like that you're doing all these different things, and you're bringing good people together. All right, Dean, I want to hear from what do you got going on? What are you working on?
Sure. So, as far as the It's Based community goes, we're brainstorming on what game to do next, if not Biggest Dickest Architectus. I'm also potentially going to start doing live streams with them and for them, mostly like Let's Plays and commentary and such. So that might be cool. I'm going to be doing my own YouTube and streaming stuff as well, starting soon. I already got a couple things recorded, like some Super Mario World, Mega Man X, Super Punch Out. You know, I love older games like that.
I love Super Punch Out. I haven't played that in a long time.
So underrated. I love that.
Yeah, it's absolutely. So I bought this indie game that somebody made called Thunder Ray because I wanted a Punch Out experience. Yeah, don't buy it. It's trash. But it was a nice try.
I was so excited. I immediately opened up a new tab and started typing it.
Oh, yeah. Look it up. I mean, it looks like it should have been good, but it unfortunately, it's a disappointment.
Many such cases, sadly.
Yeah. I love the art style, though. But go ahead.
And then I also have an independent project currently in pre-production. Think of it as a NES Mega Man game with a lot of inspiration from something like Dante's Inferno. And it's going to be running on real NES hardware as well.
Oh, I love that. That sounds awesome.
As well as modern platforms with a definitive edition.
You know what we should do? We should do a based con. I think that it would be the shit. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. But like, you can sell your books. We can show off demos of games.
There is
all of the media.
Con.
Of course,
there is a based con. Yeah.
I said it, so somebody else must have done it.
And well, I'm forgetting. I'm blanking on his last name. It's like Rob Krosk. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, it's up in, I believe, Michigan area every year. In the early fall, late summer. But yeah, it's totally worth doing. I think that there's a real hunger for it. I'm acquainted with the folks over at the Ripaverse, with the Eric July comic book project of ISOM and whatnot. And, they've been kind of dipping their toes into going to cons and things like that. But conventions are very expensive. So it's a little dicey. You know what I mean? Yeah,
for sure. It's I just think I don't know. It depends on the interest, right? But if there's enough, I think it'd be very cool to have it, because then you could, again, there'd be a lot of networking opportunities, a lot of sales opportunities. And, all these things start off small. I remember in the mid 90s, there was the very first Anime Central in Chicago where I lived. And it was like a couple of little rooms, and that was all there was. And I went there for like a day. And now Anime Central is massive. I don't go to those anymore, but I did back then because I was a weeb in the 90s. But anyway, those were in the 90s. Anime was good in the 90s. Yes, I don't know anything about it now, but I know.
Nowadays, if someone asks me if I like anime, I just say no. But 90s, 80s, 90s, 2000s anime was my
favorite. No, for sure. I was all about what I call the manime, which was like the ultra violent, action anime stuff. So
absolutely.
But yeah, anyway, okay, last thing. Are you guys playing any games, and which ones are you playing right now?
I'm shamefully playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6, but I got it free with Game Pass, so I'm okay.
They gave it to you free? You notice they're trying to give these shitty games away, like the Dragon Age Veilguard. I think you get it for free if you get like a membership to GeForce Now. Yeah. No thanks.
Yes.
So yeah. Anyway, sorry, Dean. Black Ops 6, is that it?
Yeah, for right now, that's about it. Otherwise, I've been just busy working and throwing applications and feelers out there.
Yeah, I understand that. Or what about you, Richard? Are you doing any gaming right now, or reading anything, watching anything?
Oh man, so let's see here. I've been consuming more media than usual, just due to the time of year. I always love my horror movies and whatnot. I guess of note, I just checked out a little while ago. I read Theft of Fire, like as I mentioned, by Devin Erickson. It's a new sci-fi. I can't remember what it. No, it's a full novel. It's good. I will say my only review caveat is that the second novel does need to fulfill some of the setup in the first book, or else it's going to be kind of disappointing. But that said, the guy is, working on it and everything else. And he's
what does it? What if you could describe it? Like, what is it?
It's 3 characters in a tin can, basically, for 95% of the book, but it's actually quite good. The premise is that basically some alien tech was discovered. It's generated a new space age, essentially, but it's still being kind of squirreled away by these corporations, and a group goes out to go retrieve something that's out there. And in the process, a bunch of things happen and whatnot. But it's a lot of time in a tin can. It's pretty amazing that the author makes it as good. You know what I mean? Makes it engaging, considering that kind of constraint. So I really enjoyed that. I also, let's see here. I've been doing all sorts of different stuff. I guess game-wise, I just played the latest Mech Warrior Clans because it was on Game Pass. Checked that out a little bit. I'm a big mech guy, and that's where I'm going to be trying to. That's going to be the initial project next year, trying to do something like that. But
so
I've also
along the lines of like BattleTech or Mech Warrior, not so much like Armored Core.
Yeah, definitely much slower. Although with a bit of, I think dashing as a mechanic is just too much fun to not figure out some way to make it into the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm not going to be going for that style of game entirely. I've been kind of playing tons and tons of the various Vampire Survivor permutations, and then another, like figuring out what works about those, what kind of tickles the brainstem, because my goal is to just make a very low cost, easy to scale game, and then once I kind of have some directional whatever, and I say, okay, I'm going to keep using assets to build things up, but my goal is to, start releasing projects that are actually completed and a decent product for people to enjoy as quickly as possible, rather than, doing the usual indie game dev thing where you draw up a gigantic plan and you're going to create Elder Scrolls but bigger and better,
right. Yeah, sure. Where your ambition is
not
further out than your reach.
Yeah, not only do you pilot the mech, but you also get out of the mech, and then you crawl up the ladder, and then you go over here, and you have a cooking mini game that you're going to play where you,
and romance options with the mech and all that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I want to romance the robots.
Yeah.
So, okay, last question, I promise. Why do stories matter? Because this is like where we're coming across now is, people who are not, I guess, they're not on the left or whatever. They are understanding that the culture is important, but I want to hear it from you guys. Why do stories matter to us?
Stories matter because culture and society matters. And when people consume stories, it gives them a lot of their viewpoints, a lot of their morals and such. For example, like, we talked about earlier how there's just like this small cult of weirdos, really, who are orchestrating all this woke nonsense. But they have a huge following of kind of like default liberals who just kind of absorb the media that they're around it and kind of form their opinions and their norms based on that. And a lot of those are people who, if they really knew what they were subscribing to, they probably wouldn't. So stories with good morals, good characters, good role models, those are extremely important if you want to shape a society properly.
All right, Richard, why do stories matter?
Well, I think this goes back to the comment that you made originally about, some things being beyond true. It's so true that they enter a certain transcendent level. And the reality is that storytelling is one of the foundations of civilization. As long as there's been any kind of social structure, there are indications that there was storytelling going on. And so to ignore a fundamental component of the human psyche, I think is unwise. We can pretend that we're all automatons and people are interchangeable cogs and everybody can just be programmed like computers, but that's just not the case. And so the need is not just to have one story, but to have many stories that all point towards the same truths and belief structures so that you can reach more people, because everybody is going to perceive stories through different filters, different ways. The one case where some of the everyone is a snowflake takes are true is how stories impact people, because you'll have 100 people read a story, and even if half of them liked it, in all likelihood no two of them are going to agree on what was the best part and what was their favorite scenes and what it meant to them and how it related to them. So these are deeply personal things, and I think it's something that we need to take much more seriously as a society and as culture and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, both of you guys. I really enjoyed this. I hope you guys had fun and having this conversation.
Absolutely, it was great. Thank you for having us.
Oh yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on. So I'm gonna end it there. Thanks, guys, for joining me in this conversation. Thank you for watching. Please give this video a like if you could. I'm gonna be doing more of these interviews with more of the people involved in this, and hopefully others. I'm gonna try to get some different kinds of guests on as well. Maybe not necessarily people who create content, but people who look at this from the sort of let's say philosophical or even like theological level, because I think that there's like a lot more going on here that we have to like understand, or at least that I'm interested in understanding. So if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, leave me a comment, let me know what you guys think about what we talked about on the show today, and check out the links to our guests in the description. We're going to have everything that there is to know about these guys, at least that they're willing to tell us, in the description of this video. Thank you so much for coming on this episode, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Long live Vivian.